Talk. Got all my stuff ready to go. Just wait here. I'll put this over here. There's no one close. Hope everybody had a nice Shabbos.
Thank you. You?
Fuck, Chef amazing. Two of our older grandchildren, so their parents were going away to Kfar Chabad, and my son was bringing there, and they didn't want to go. So they asked him, where do you want to go? So they said, we want to go to Savta and Zaidi in Yerushalayim. So they came all by themselves on the bus from Sfaz. And they spent Shabbos with us. It was the greatest. It was so much fun.
How old are they?
13 and 10, I guess. Something like that. 11.
That's adorable.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. They're so sweet. And their little cousin was there who they didn't really know. I mean, what do they know some of their cousins? So she was there. She was putting on her show. And then I must tell you, because this was just wild. Late Shabbos, I got a WhatsApp from our daughter. Probably my best friend growing up. We used to walk. He used to live 15 blocks from elementary school, and I lived 4. So he used to come home for lunch with me every single day to eat lunch in my house rather than eat in school alone. John Michelson, one of the few Jewish guys around. So John Michelson, yeah.
You grew up with him?
Grew up with him. We went to high school together. We switched high schools together. He found this great idea that you could finish grade 12 in December if you went to a certain school, and so we did that together. Then we moved to a certain place together, spent the next 6 months there. So he ended up in our kids' Chabad house in Australia for Shabbos.
Wow.
That is unbelievable.
Unbelievable. So I guess my daughter asked, where are you from? Vancouver. My name used to be Kaplan. Kaplan? The Kaplan boys? Yeah. Wow. So he sent a picture to my daughter, who sent it to me, of me in grade 10 in some play that we were in together.
Oh, wow.
Wild. John Michelson. We were very close friends. I mean, I haven't seen him in 35 years, but he's a lawyer. That's not true. No, 35 years. It's probably 35. I went to his office once downtown. He's a lawyer, an ambulance chaser.
Really?
His main client the last time I was there was Imelda Marcus's secretary. So how he got to her, I don't know.
Oh, man.
But the client probably stole like 500 pairs of her shoes.
Oh, he did. I asked about shoes. He said, yeah, she had a lot of shoes. Come on. Anyway, okay. Let's do that. I did ask about the shoes. I remember distinctly, because that's what she was most famous for.
That's correct.
Okay, let's do the Kitsurim. Well, let me get through this. Iker Shechina B'Tachtonim. The Kitzur Pralef. We're going to start Ois Hey, so we'll see all 4 Kitsurim. Iker Shechina B'Tachtonim. The essence of Shechina was in the lower realms. Yivar the Kavanis B'riyas Ha'elamis. Shia Dir B'Tachtonim. The ultimate purpose of the creation of the worlds was there should be a dwelling place in this lower worlds, which we saw very clearly in the Rebbe's Ois Daled, explaining the Frierdiker Rebbe's Ois Aleph. V'nasal Yedei Iskafi V'Yishafcha. That's quite about, well, there's two different levels of avodah that we've learned about: subduing the Yetzer Hara and transforming. Shemaim Shechar Sevev, and this draws down Sevev. Zeu B'Chulam and B'Shava, and that's what it means. Kadiskafi Sitrach V'Yistalak Yikutu B'Richu B'Chulam. Kitzer based Yivar and Yina Karbonis B'Avodah. Adam Ki Yakriv. And the Rebbe gives only one of the 2 pshatim in the Kitzer. The 2 pshatim, the first one was Mikem. It's dependent on you. You can do it. Tzarech liyos mikem korban. Eish shalamayla v'eish milamata. A fire from above and a fire from below. What's the fire from above? Avad nefesh elokis. What's the fire from below? The fire that you and I have to ignite. The fire of the nefesh habahamis. Avad nefesh habahamis. How do we ignite that fire? Baal yadei islav shus nefesh elokis v'nefesh habahamis, through the inclothing of the nefesh elokis and the nefesh habahamis, which means Lizbeinin b'izbeinin u'seloki shegam nefesh habahamis yochel asudei. As Amnon said on Thursday, learn Chassidus. That's what he said. Kitzer, Gimel, Ruach Shtus, Yivar the Ruach Shtus. Toikef HaTaiva v'Nefesh HaBamis B'chlal. Mechasim Ala Emes, hides the truth. V'Goymim Heder Hergish Elokus. V'Ilui Mitzvahs, and causes a lack of sensitivity to godliness and the loftiness of mitzvahs, and also a lack of sensitivity to the Bechisus Arichukment, the lowliness of being distant from godliness. The last verse, which we finished on Thursday, the Kitzur, which we didn't read, even though I was told I should, but I didn't anyway. I stood up to the pressure. Sometimes you have to stand up to social pressure. Yamshich, the Ruach Shtus. I wonder who told me. Yamshich, the Ruach Shtus, mechasa rak al mides the Rebbe Shalokis. We learned something very important in Dalet, because in Gimel the Rebbe told us that an Aveira separates us from the Eibishter. In Dalet the Rebbe told us that that's only the midos of the Nefesh Elokis, only the attributes, the emotional attributes, but not the etzem. The Ruach Shtus mechasa rak al mides the Nefesh Elokis v'loi al atzmusa, and not on its essence, the etzem iskashus, and the essential connection. Okay, v'hine. Just as there is turning away, leaning below das, which is what we learned about in Gimel and Dalet, Ruach Shtus, acting in a way that's irrational. Shu nikra b'shem shtus de klipa. Hine kameichin. Similarly, in Musadas, when we started talking about shtus, because what the Rebbe said, there is also shtus de klipa, so I guess that means there's something else, and here it is, shtus de kedusha. There's also turning away beyond intellect. It's still not intellectual behavior, but it's beyond intellect as opposed to below intellect. Now, some people have a hard time relating to that. What does that mean, beyond intellect? But the simplest mushal of that is the relationship of a child to a parent. Obviously, it's not based on intellect. It's based on something much deeper than intellect. A child doesn't have a connection to his father because he's come to the intellectual conclusion that his father is worthy of a relationship. There's something much deeper than that goes beyond intellect. Okay. Famous Gemara in Ksuvas, which a lot of people are learning around here. Amru alav al Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Eloi. There's a sugya in the Gemara in Ksuvas, and there's a song that's sung at many weddings, though not generally Lubavitch weddings. Ketzed merakti lifnei akala. Ketzed merakti lifnei akala. Everybody knows that song, right? How do you dance in front of the kala? So the Gemara talks about all sorts of different people who danced in front of the kala in different ways. So in the context of that Gemara, it brings the story of Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Eloi, but most particularly Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. He's going to be the hero of the story. Amr alav al Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Eloi. Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Eloi, who was a Tana, she'netel bas shel hadas, bad, shel hadas. He used to take a sprig of a hadas, right? Hadas from lulav and esrog, umerakid lifnei kala, and he would wave it and dance in front of the kala. Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, was an Amara. Meraked atlas, he would dance with 3 sprigs of hadassim. And Rashi explains, sholosh badim, 3 sprigs, 3 twigs. Zorek achas u'mekabel achas, he'd throw one and catch one. In other words, he would juggle hadassim, which is not easy to do because not being good at juggling, but anybody who is will tell you that it's much easier to juggle things than have more weight and move more evenly, whereas this would be hard to throw up and down. They wouldn't come down at the same speed all the time. But that's why people juggle with balls. At our wedding, one of the students in yeshiva was had played on Broadway in a play called Barnum, and he was actually a star on Broadway until he got frum, and that was the end of his acting career. But he was an incredible juggler. Barnum was about Barnum and Bailey, about the circus, and he learned how to juggle. He's one of the few people in America. There are more people in Europe because circus is a much bigger thing in Europe than in America. He could juggle 5, which is pretty good. I never saw anybody juggle 5 live. I never, probably saw a video of it or television or something. But he could juggle 5. So at our wedding, he put on a whole juggling act, and he was juggling 5 balls, and he was juggling 3, and one of them was an apple, and he ate the apple as he was busy juggling. He ate the apple, and he had 4 kerchiefs that he was throwing up. Also, he was juggling kerchiefs. So that was a fire at the end. Of course, that was the big.
That's awesome.
So this happened. It was at our wedding. I mean, he came to the wedding and he said, "Do you want me to juggle?" I said, "Well, what does that mean?" He said, "Well, I'll bring my stuff if you want. In the middle of the wedding, everybody can sit down. Everybody will be tired from dancing and sit down and watch a show for 15 minutes, and then so that's what we did. And we had a good time. And the kids were like, all the little kids were just amazed. But 5 was pretty amazing. Juggling 5 was pretty amazing. Watching him keep 4 in the air at the same time, that was impressive. Also, behind the back, all that stuff. But the 5 was what got me. So evidently, there were a few people who could do that in America. There were people in Europe who could do 6. No one had done more than 6 at that point. I have no idea what the juggling world record is now, but I'm sure it's more than 6. Just because that's the way mankind is. We progress in things of great importance. Like jumping over bars with no clothes on and juggling balls.
I thought they had tights on.
What?
I thought they had a...
Yeah, well, they wear underpants. Underpants and undershirt. So, Amar Rabbi Zeira. So Rabbi Zeira, when he saw Rav Shmuel by Rav Yitzchak, Maraked at Tlas, he used to juggle the Hadassim. So he wasn't so happy. Now, you've all heard of Rav Zeira. You've seen him in the Gemara. Amar Rav Zeira, Kamach Siflan Saba. You're embarrassing us. Saba. Old man. Rashi, Shemazalzel b'kavod Talmidei Chachamim. You're cheapening the honor of Talmidei Chachamim. V'neig, and you're behaving kalas reish in a light-headed way, ba'atzmai, meaning in a way that's not deserving of honor, and it's not beseder. You're a big Talmid Chacham. Now, obviously, he was older than Rav Zeira because Rav Zeira referred to him as Saba. Ki nach nafshe, when he passed away, Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, this is still the Gemara. Afsik amudu denara. It was a miracle at his levaya. There was a pillar of fire that separated Bain D-Day between him, Lakule Alma, to all the people who came to the Levaya. Meaning, as they were carrying his body to the grave, there was a fire between the people following the people carrying the body and the body itself. Rav Zeira was at the Levaya and realized that he had made a mistake when he chastised Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, because clearly he was a very, very holy man. Amar Rav Zeira, and he understood that there was a connection between his actions at the wedding and the miracle at the Levaya. Amar Rabbi Zeira, he said three different versions as to what Rabbi Zeira said, all of them based on the same word, shita. Amar Rabbi Zeira, ahanele sheite lesaba. Ahanele was good for him, meaning like hana, benefit. It's good for him. Sheite, a shoit is a stick, a staff. Right? Shoit shel hadas, the stick of hadas, shayim meraked bay, that he used to dance with. Va'amrile, there are those that say, he didn't say shoite, shtus say l'sabi, he said shtus. Shayim isnag kishaita, they would act like a shaita at the chasna. Va'amrile, there are those who say sheet say l'saba, his shita. Shita say min hage, Rashi. Right, but all, interesting enough, all three based on the same root, the root that we're dealing with, shtus.
And she tells like his opinion?
Well, in this way, his behavior, right? Because it wasn't so much an intellectual opinion, but his behavior, the way he saw things should be done.
Rabbi, so the first one said about his behavior.
No, the shoit.
Yeah.
A shoit is a stick.
So the stick that he was holding.
The stick that he used to juggle, or his shtus, or his position on things, meaning the way he decided he should act. The shtus zu, this shtus, how do you lamayda min das? Obviously, it's very holy. It's beyond us. He went beyond intellectual understanding. Which is a very lofty and wondrous level. Now the Rebbe is going to explain all this. The ish v'isha, man and woman. How they zachu, the Gemara says if they merit. And the Shechina rests between them. You know, a marriage, a proper marriage, So then that marriage brings about a revelation of Shekhinah in the house. How do we see that? Welcome back, Azriel. How do we see that? The Ish who Eish Yud, the word Ish is the fire of Yud, the Isha who Eish K. And the Isha is the fire of the letter Hey. The word is Eish and Hey. Together, what are they? Therefore, when they merit Ish v'Isha together and they work together, Azai Harehem Yud K. They are the Eish of Yud K. Yud K, Shechina, godliness. Uba Begiluin, it comes in a revealed way, Binyan Adayadin, an everlasting edifice, I think is how that's usually translated on the invitations or whatever. In Cain, if so, I mean, what's happening at a chasna is obviously a very, very amazing thing spiritually. And that's what Shmuel Bar Rav Yitzchak was able to chap. And not only was he able to chap, he was able to chap it in such a way, he connected to that level so powerfully. What happened at his levaya? What was revealed?
Clarifier.
The Eish of the chasna. When he used to celebrate the chasna, the Eish was revealed to show clearly, and that's why Rav Zera understood that it all had to do with the chasna. It's all had to do with the Eish, the spiritual level of a chasna. Under the chuppah, it's like Gan Eden. Right? Anybody who's ever stood under a chuppah, right? The first time, usually people stand under a chuppah, they're the chasna and kala, and they're completely clueless, and they don't remember anything, and it's a complete blank afterwards, right? Then later on in your life, you stand under your children's chuppahs, and it's probably the most powerful experience you'll ever have. Right? Very few things as powerful as that. And what's under the chuppah is the Eibishter. It's Pashat Gan Eden under there.
I remember my mother-in-law just giving me funny looks.
Yeah, what when you were a chassan? The same. I don't remember much under the chuppah, I must say. I can't remember much. It's pretty, and she doesn't see anything. So, but under children's chuppahs, it's pretty amazing. Chuppah is Gan Eden, the chuppah is a little taste of Lasid Lava, the future. The cave at the Sefer Gever, the woman surrounds the man. She goes around 7 times, like it says is going to happen. Mashiach. I don't know what Lubavitchers did for the first 6 generations of Lubavitch. I have no idea. But now, in our generation, so each time we go around, we think about the Alter Rebbe the first time, and the Mitzvah Rebbe the second time, and the Tzemach Tzedek, and the Rebbe surround those 2 kids with all of the koyach of all of the Rebbe. It's an amazing thing. I don't know what they did in the 6th generation. Maybe the Maggid in 6, in the 5th they did the Baal. I don't know what they did. We're lucky we have 7. In Cain, it's a very high level. Because of this, because Shmuel Bar Rav Yitzchak was aware, powerfully aware of this level of godly reality, and this level of godly reality took him to a place beyond intellect. Because as powerful as intellect is, intellect ultimately is not that which can connect us to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Intellect can help connect, can bring about a drawing down of our innate connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu into our conscious reality. That's what we use intellect for, right? That's what Chabad is about. Chabad isn't about intellect. Chabad is about emunah, about bringing a level beyond intellect into conscious me. What's the gateway into conscious me? My intellect is the gateway into conscious me, but we're trying to bring something beyond intellect into intellect. What is that which is beyond intellect? Emunah. Right? Because Amunah can connect you to something that intellect can't connect you to. Your Amunah is connected to Kadosh Baruch in a way that your intellect can't. Amunah is connected to levels of godliness that intellect can't understand. Leis machshavat tfisa beichlal, no thought can comprehend him. The essence of Kadosh Baruch Hu can't be comprehended in any way, shape, or form by intellect, whereas it's connected to by the essence of your soul, which is rooted in the essence of Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's where your Amunah comes from. So that's Lamayla Mitam Vadas. So Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yitzchak could somehow touch that level beyond intellect and rejoice in it. So therefore, he merited to have the Eish of the chuppah revealed at his levaya. Therefore, he merited these tremendous revelations. The afsik amud denara, that there was this pillar of fire separating him from the rest of the people at his levaya. Because again, he was the one who was able to chap that that's what was going on at the chasna. Whether he saw it or not, I don't know. But he appreciated that that's what the chasna is, a revelation of Shekhinah. So he had a revelation of Shekhinah at his levaya. Shezeu bechinas gilui or begilui mamish. There says something very interesting. A level of the revelation of light in a revealed way, mamish. Well, how else can light reveal itself if not begilui? Well, that's actually a very interesting point. You and I talked about at great length at the beginning of the Mimer that every time we do a Veda of Iskafia, every Veda we do, anything we do that connects us to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, we're manmishich or sevev, we reveal or sevev in the world. Can we see it? No. So what does that mean it's revealed? If it's revealed and I don't see it, so what does that mean? So there's two different levels of revelation. There's bringing about the revelation of the thing itself such that that state of reality is indeed revealed. But then there's another level in which it's revealed to something else. Bringing about the revelation of something in a particular space, so to speak, doesn't mean that it's necessarily revealed to everybody in that space, but it's in that space. It's an example in this space that we're in. Well, there are countless radio stations that are revealing radio waves in the space that we're in here. No? Radio waves all over this room. Not revealed to us. If we were a radio, if we had a radio, we could reveal them. They're here. Why aren't they revealed to us? We're not a kli for that revelation, not a vessel for that revelation. That radio is, not that it's above us, below us, it's just a different state of reality. Different, what do they call it? Those frequencies. Different frequency than we work on, right? So we can't pick them up. Well, you can get a machine that does pick it up. Okay, fine. It's called a radio, or I assume it's not exactly the same when you do it on your Wi-Fi, right? Because you're not really picking up the radio waves. You're picking up Wi-Fi. It's a whole different thing. The radio waves are still banging around, but you don't have a kli for them. This thing isn't a kli for them. This thing, right, isn't a kli for them. But a radio is. Okay, so click on your transistor radio and fiddle with the dial, and then you'll hook into a little station and you'll hear Arabic and you'll say, no, I don't want that. And you'll keep going until you hear some Hebrew, and then you'll go, okay, I don't want that either. And you'll turn it off. There you go. But it's out there. Wi-Fi also obviously is out there, but everybody here does have a kli to pick up that stuff. I'm not a kli for it. I have a kli for it. So it is revealed. It's just not begilui mamish. Right? So godly light is everywhere in this world. Godly light is revealed everywhere in this world. It's just you and I aren't necessarily kalim to experience that godly light. There are people who are, they're called tzaddikim. But you and I aren't. We're aware of it intellectually, that I'm not a kli to, so to speak, see it. Right? But I at least am a kli to appreciate its existence in our midst. Okay, why? Because I have an intellect and I can appreciate that. Okay, but obviously to see it would be an experience beyond intellect. Mm-hmm. So by him, there was gilui or gilui mamish. It was actually revealed. The people saw the fire. I don't know what they thought at this chasned, at this levaya. Ubir other Rebbe is going to explain this. Dine, or ein sof. The infinite light of God, harei leis machshava tfisa bei. No thought can comprehend the highest levels of godly reality. And it's beyond the definition of comprehension. In other words, it's not that I'm not smart enough to understand it. And if I were smarter, I'd understand it. It's that it's beyond understanding. Intellect is not a tool, it's not a kli to bring about the revelation of that state of reality or to connect to that state of reality. It can appreciate the existence of that state of reality. But to truly touch that state, I have to go beyond intellect. The kol hasoga, any level of comprehension, Even the highest levels of comprehension, the most brilliant people imaginable, and the most brilliant people imaginable in Torah and mitzvahs. It's still within the delineated reality of comprehension. It's intellect. That which is not within the defined reality of comprehension, it's not intellect. And that can't be comprehended, that can't be grasped by comprehension, by intellect. It's a simple example, we've talked about it many, many times. Try to explain the color orange to someone who was born without the power of sight. It's not that it's above intellect, but orange isn't an idea, it's a visual experience. If you don't have visual experience, so then orange has no reality for you. You can't understand orange. Once you've seen orange, you can talk about orange and understand different shades of orange, and I'm sure that two designers sitting and designing women's clothing and talking about different shades of particular colors, they can talk about it and they know exactly what they're talking about. Why? Well, they've seen orange. But talk about that with someone who was born blind, God forbid. There's no concept of orange. Oh, well, try to say, well, it's sort of warm and hot. Oh, yeah, right, that is definitely don't understand what you're talking about. It's the color of the inside of a flame. The inside of a flame. What's a flame? It's a whole world that person isn't aware of, that you and I take for granted, which is a very beautiful world, and hopefully we thank God for every day, the fact that we can see, or that the fact that we live in a day and age where they have glasses, which help us see. Okay. So intellect is a power that can only understand one thing and one thing only. It's called ideas. Intellect can't understand emotion. Right? It tries. I would imagine, I don't know what percentage, but I would assume it's a very, very, very high percentage of all of poetry ever written is trying to describe emotions. Right? Most poetry is usually trying to describe an emotion. Well, how do you describe an emotion? You can't describe an emotion with words. An emotion's a feeling. It's not an idea. Oh, but if you've had that emotion, so then you can start talking about it, and other people have also experienced the same emotion. Well, actually, probably you'll arouse in them a certain emotion by virtue of talking about that emotion because they've had it. And so you might bring them to tears, you might bring them to laughter, you might whatever, joy, whatever. But only someone who's experienced that particular thing, right? There are all sorts of people who evidently don't believe in love. The way they act, it certainly doesn't seem that they believe in such a thing. Why? I guess they've never experienced it. If you've experienced love, then you believe in love. Can I prove love in a laboratory? Of course not. It's not an idea. I can only prove ideas in laboratories. I can't prove emotions in laboratories. Can I prove the existence of emotion? Even that, not really. Even though once you and I believe in emotion, so we can hook someone up and we'll identify certain physiological activity as a particular emotion. But that's only if I believe in that emotion in the first place. Someone who doesn't say, it's not love, that's just a bunch of physiological stuff. And you'll say, how could they say that? Well, they'll say that about spiritual experience. Because if you could hook someone up who's experiencing some spiritual experience at this particular moment, I assume their physiological energy, all that would be measured differently than if they're experiencing something rather mundane. But the person who doesn't believe in spirituality, doesn't believe in anything beyond intellect, wouldn't describe it that way. They just describe it some other way, some physiological way. Okay, fine. So to love is, most of us believe in it, Baruch Hashem. I don't have to believe in it, we've experienced it. Okay, so there's certain levels of reality that intellect can't touch. Doesn't mean intellect isn't impressive, it's very impressive. But it can't touch Elokus. There's certain levels of godliness that intellect can't touch. So if I want to touch those levels of godliness, I have to go beyond intellect. Rabbi Shab, who wrote the most difficult and intellectual Chassidus that basically anybody ever wrote, it's called the Rambam of Chassidus, said in our generation we have to put seichel to the side and rely on emunah. What?
Songfather and bass.
I don't know. I don't think in either. They just said it. I don't know exactly where he said it, but that he said that about our generation. Now he's talking about his generation, which is 100 years ago. Ein ben David ba'el behesach hadas. Mashiach comes from a level beyond das. K'de'isa b'sefer shel Beinanim Perek Yud Ches. The legabe HaKadosh Baruch Hu, relative to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shul ha'mayla min ha'seichel. God obviously is beyond intellect. Vadas. V'leis machshava tvisa beichlal. And no thought can comprehend him at all. There are aspects of godliness that we can comprehend in thought, which is really amazing. Because there's aspects of godly reality that have descended down into Chokhmah, right? And from Chokhmah, from a godly level of Chokhmah, they've descended down all the way into human Chokhmah. So there are certain levels of godly reality that you and I can understand. Now, obviously, when we understand it, we realize that we're not necessarily understanding it as it is. We're understanding it within the context of our ability to understand such ideas. In that physical, when I say physical intellect, I mean the intellect of physical beings. Because every single thing that you and I understand, we turn into some sort of physical mushroom. Turn God into Aris and Kalim. Higher, lower. Okay. Because those are the only things that we understand. You and I can't possibly think about something that we haven't experienced outside of ourselves first. Right? So now, we could make up something that's a combination of all those things that's never happened outside of ourselves. So Dr. Seuss can create all sorts of interesting creatures, but every detail of the creature exists outside and has been experienced by him. So purple, gold, eyes, fur. So he'll put it all together into an interesting creature, and he'll give an interesting name to that creature, but every prat and every detail of that creature exists outside of him, and he's experienced it outside of him. If I haven't experienced something outside of me, I can't think about it inside me. And that's how Chassidus explains the difference between the machshava of the Eibishter and the machshava of us. When we say the pasuk that we read every mincha time in a fast day, my thoughts and your thoughts. What differentiates God's thoughts from our thoughts? Obviously all sorts of things, but most clearly, God's thoughts, the only reason that thing exists is because God thinks about it. God's thought is the source of its existence. Our thoughts can't possibly think about anything that doesn't exist outside of us. It's exactly the opposite. It's not that we create it. It has to exist before we can think about it. Now, again, we can think about all sorts of interesting and creative things, but what we're doing is putting together variables that we've experienced outside of ourselves. So again, the blind person who hasn't experienced color will never think in terms of color. He's not going to think that way. How can he possibly think in terms of color? There's no color for him. What that looks like, I don't know. That must be very bizarre. How do you, we take so for granted that so many of our thoughts are based on all of the things we see around us. Well, what if you don't see anything around you? Then what do you think about? I don't know. I guess you think about sounds more. I do remember hearing a very special line from a blind musician who was being interviewed by an Israeli. And he asked him, obviously it was a setup that he says this all the time, but it's still an interesting line. He said, well, being blind it has its advantages and disadvantages. He says, obviously the disadvantages are pretty clear, but the advantages are something that a person has to appreciate. He said, when I meet a person, I don't see their exterior, I see their interior. Which is very interesting, right? You and I are immediately stuck by the thing we see. And see that. He just hears their voice, and it just gets, on a certain level, a much deeper appreciation of their panemias, of what's this person really like. We're struck by the now, obviously, this is called a panim, and it's called a panim because from the panim you can see a lot of panemias in the person. That's true. But they can hide it. It's harder to hide in your voice. It's interesting. But I still think we're pretty happy we can see. And I think we're pretty happy we can think. But we also have to realize that it might limit us And certainly there are people who say that if you can't understand it, it must not exist, which is a completely absurd thing to say. It's so funny because it's such stupid intellect. Right? But okay, people get into intellect so powerfully that they think there's nothing beyond intellect, which is just bad intellect. Right? Don't they believe in advertising? Advertising is all about beyond intellect. Right? It's hitting subconscious levels of you. It's not intellect. leGani Kadosh Baruch Hu l'mayla misekum v'das leisum l'shor tvis beichlala. Kol, therefore, everybody. What does the Baal HaTanya say? Kol kipesim etzlei yisbarach. Everybody's like an idiot relative to the Eibishter. In other words, our most powerful relationship with Him is not a function of our intellect. Kidechsi, what does David HaMelech say? Ani ber. The best translation of that is bur. It probably might even be the source of the word. I don't know. Ani bur. Bear is how you translate, but I'm a boor, v'loy eidon, I don't know. Bahamas haisi, I'm a behema. Bahamas haisi mach, I'm sorry, a behema I was, but I am with you. Vani tamidi mach, and I'm always with you. So now that last line seems to contradict everything else, because everything else seems to say I'm on a very, very low level, and that last line is a very powerful thing. I'm always with you. Kloimer, what's David HaMelech saying? The fact that I'm a boor and a behema, that's what allows me to always be with you. Because if I live only in accordance with intellect, what will happen? Well, we all know this. God will be very hidden. Because there'll be all sorts of things that don't make sense. And so I won't see God in them. But if I can transcend intellect, the fact that this doesn't make sense won't hide the godliness of that event. That doesn't mean I understand it when I see the godliness, and I still don't understand it. But I appreciate the fact that it's a godly event, which is every event that happens. But if I insist that something has to be understood intellectually, so that I'm blocking God out of an incredibly large part of existence, because there's so much of existence that doesn't make sense. Right? Things that happen in the world that clearly a Kadosh Baruch Hu orchestrates, and we don't understand why. Okay, fine. Right? Some of them incredibly good, some of them what we would sort of describe as the opposite. All sorts of things that just happen in nature that, okay, we can understand what's going on, but the why of it, I don't know, why in the world are there blue whales? Like, what does God want from blue whales? I don't know, okay. I don't know. And they're amazing, they're incredible, they're okay, and if there weren't blue whales, what would happen? I don't know. Something would happen. Some people would be out of a job, I guess. They study blue whales. So how do I stay connected to the Eibishter constantly? By transcending intellect, because intellect will block godliness from me, because there'll be all sorts of things I don't understand, and so I won't see him there. He's there too. In order to reach the essence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, is through annulling will that's beyond rational reality. Meaning what?
By transforming it?
By transcending it. Right? Because again, if I act only in accordance with intellect, there'll be all sorts of places that I can't find God. Why? Because he's not there, so to speak. What does that mean he's not there? Well, if you demand that intellect be able to explain it rationally, well, you won't find him there because there is no rational explanation for this particular reality. Okay. This is called shtus. But this is shtus to kedusha, reaching a level beyond tam v'das. Shtus to klipa is what you and I would call below tam v'das, not acting in a rational way, in a way where in a time when rational behavior is called for. Right? Okay, and that we saw what that is. The Ruach Shtus that the Rebbe described in Gimel and Dalet. And then there's Ruach Shtus that's L'mayla mitam v'das, connecting to a level that's beyond intellect. And there's all sorts of things that are beyond intellect, that are just part of our everyday lives. The love of a parent for a child is completely beyond intellect, doesn't make any sense. Just is. Okay? And it's not like we ask questions about it. I have to understand it. I don't understand it. We've mentioned it so many times, right? just remember having a conversation with my son, and it was just a powerful conversation because he said something so simple but so powerful. Right? It was, I think, the birth of his fifth or sixth child. It's not that this was something new that he had never experienced before, but she was, I don't know, his first 5 were girls. So if it was 5, it was a girl. 6 or 7, 6 and 7, I think, were boys. There were 7 and 8 boys. I don't remember. Doesn't matter. There were 2 boys in a row. Baruch Hashem, they were in a row, right? That they have each other to keep, talk to. So they're not surrounded on all sides by girls, right? They're surrounded on the outside, but on the inside they can talk to each other and break things together and have a good time. So he said, it's so. He was talking about, parenthood. He said it's such a crazy thing because I've lived my whole life without, let's say it was Shira. I think Shira's number 5. Lived my whole life without Shira, who was over this Shabbos. Shira was by us this Shabbos. Said that she's 2 weeks old, but I can't imagine life without her, which is true. She's been in your life for 2 weeks, and you can't imagine life without her. Well, that's a ridiculous. That does not make any sense, right? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense because you've lived 30 years without her, so you don't have to imagine it. You've lived it. You know exactly what it's like. But once you have that child, and they're a minute old, but okay, after 2 weeks they're already around a little bit. So you literally cannot imagine life without that child. So that's a completely super rational connection that doesn't make any sense. Okay, fine. And that's the most powerful connection we have with things. That's called shtus. And now the Rebbe is going to talk about nevuah for the next 8-10 lines, explaining the whole notion of nevuah. What's nevuah? Nevuah is when a person is given access to information that intellect can't access. Because after all, if intellect could access that information, we wouldn't need nevuah, would we? Right? Intellect is never going to come to the conclusion that on the 15th of Tishrei, it's a good idea to take a green stick and a lemon and shake it. Intellect just won't come to that conclusion. Why not? It's just not a reasonable thing to do, right? It's perfectly understood in intellect once nevuah gives me access to that place where I now know that that's the Ratzon of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So it's not that my intellect finds it impossible to relate to it. No, okay, Beseder, I get it, right? I mean, sort of. And I can talk about how intellectually, how all 4 species relate to different types of Jews and why it's so important, especially after Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And that all makes sense. But the essence of the thing itself, the very fact that is the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, intellect could come to that conclusion? Absolutely not. There's no way. Okay, so I need something called nevuah. Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah, which opened us up, gave us a window into a whole level of reality that we would never understand intellectually. And most of that, not all of it, but much of it is the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I mean, it's all the Ratzon, but I mean, some of it's just, Ratzon neto, because it's a mitzvah. This is what God wants. It's also ideas about reality that are in that window that we would never, ever come to ourselves. Okay? I don't think anybody would ever appreciate the fact that there are 10 spheres intellectually. Right? Okay. But once that's revealed, so then fine. So now we can talk about it. And that's nevuah. V'zeu gam kein masha novi nikra b'shem meshuga. A novi is called a meshuga. This is when the B'nai Nevim come to Yehu HaMelech. So Yehu HaMelech says to them, it's in Malachim, I think, Malachim base, it shows out. Right? Yehu HaMelech says when they come, Madua ba Meshuga zeh. Why did this Meshugana come? Why is he a Meshuga? Well, because a Navi, now obviously when the Navi is walking around day by day, he's not acting in a way of Shigaon. But the Navi, mitzad being a Navi, so being a Navi by definition is he's acting in a way that's not based on normal, rational behavior. And we'll see what happens to a Navi when he experiences Nevuah. So fascinating. Everybody but Moshe Rabbeinu. Dehine, be'esis galus and Nevuah. The time of the revelation of Nevuah for a Navi, hayatzarich liyers v'afshota segashmis. He had to throw off his gashmis. Meaning, what did he have to throw off? No, read 2 more lines. Four more words. V'hainu hafshatas haseichel v'midas. He had to throw off his own intellect and his own midas, his experience of self, because what is he trying to become a kli for? An experience of something beyond self. He's going to become a kli for the experience of a Kadosh Baruch Hu's reality and a Kadosh Baruch Hu's seichel, so to speak. Right? He might. I mean, most nevuah has information. Not all nevuah has information. A nevuah can also just be an experience of godly revelation. It doesn't have to be information. But most nevuah, I mean, the nevuahs we hear about are usually information. Even though sometimes the information isn't clear at all. The Navi, you read about the Nevuah, and you know, what is a boiling pot? What is this menorah about? What's this all about? Okay, so it might not be clear what the information is, but there's also information. Or there's just an experience. But in order to be privy to that experience, what does the Navi have to do? He has to get out of himself. To transcend himself. So what does that mean? He transcends his own seichel and his own midas. Because if he's stuck in his own seichel and his own midas, he's not a kli for God's seichel and God's midas, so to speak. He's got his own. Now, later on, what's going to happen? He's going to have to translate that to you and I through his own conscious reality. He's going to come out of the prophetic experience and have to translate it to you and I. Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah was so unbelievably clear that he could translate it to you and I in a way that you and I understand very, very simply and very clearly. Try to understand Yeshayahu Navi's nevuah. Much less clear. Some of it's clear, but most of it's not so clear. Why? Well, because he didn't see with what's referred to by Chazal as Paklaria Meira, the clear-looking glass. He saw in a somewhat foggy-looking glass. He knew he was seeing the Eibishter, but it wasn't as clear. Moshe Rabbeinu saw the Eibishter like you and I see pencils.
Rashi said he drew the moon.
Yeah, the Eibishter had to draw the moon, but that was a separate. That was Gashmis. Oops.
We did
questions.
Reading questions.
Whatever germs I've got, you can do without. I'm not enjoying them particularly. I can't say that I'm happy that they decided to latch onto me. So call them a sugar. So what did Navi do? Now, why used to happen? It's amazing. He had to be in a state of complete bittul, complete loss of self. Oh, so what does that mean? He lost self-control. So what do we know about most Nevi'im? He used to lay on the ground and shake, have something akin to what a person might call an epileptic fit. They were laying there, shaking and on the ground. Also, having taken off their clothes. They were naked. Right? Not Moshe, everybody else. That's why. That's also inyan havshatas levushim be'esin. Why they would take off their clothes, which are an expression of self. Like it says by Shaul HaMelech, v'yavshe gamu es begadav v'yiznabe. He took off his clothes and experienced nevuah. I mean, they took off every vestige of self. The levushim hem by mitzad chet eitzadas. Where did levushim come from? Interestingly enough, chet eitzadas. Until the chet eitzadas, until that experience in Gan Eden. So we didn't have levushim. What did the chet eitzadas give us? A sense of self. Why do we have levushim? Because we have a sense of self. So that means we become self-conscious. So we also cover up ourselves. Okay, but I mean, it's positive. You're supposed to wear levushim. Don't all of a sudden come to a conclusion, oh, wow, I learned in Chassidus that levushim are all self, and I want to transcend self, so I'm going to walk around naked all day. No, don't. I'm sure there are people who have heard this and done that, but they're not particularly healthy. They don't get it, right? Okay, fine. But the Nevi'im used to take off their clothes. Why? The levushim in by mitzad chet eitzadas, the kedem chet. Before the chet, what does it say? Ksiv yushnei marumim. They were lacking clothes. V'lo yizbei and they weren't embarrassed. Why? They weren't self-conscious because they had no notion of self. Now, how they did the Avera in the first place, of course, is the age-old question. I mean, the Avera gave us the consciousness of self, but how did they do the Avera without that consciousness? Okay, hard to understand. Obviously, orchestrated by the Eibishter.
The Avera of being naked, the Avera of...
No, there's no Avera being naked. They were naked because that's the way the Abishter created them. The Avera of eating the fruit, whatever it was, the esrog, the wheat, the fig, right?
Predas.
I mean, people say apple. It's interesting. The only place apple shows up is in Kabbalah. Doesn't mean it's not. Couldn't be an apple. Might have been an apple, but in Nigla it might have been a wheat. Might have been a fig. I mean, they took a fig leaf, covered themselves up. Right. So they were without clothing. They weren't embarrassed. Why? Well, because they had no self-consciousness. What was brought? Nischadesh inyan halevushim, the notion of garments. Garments meaning I have to cover myself up because I'm aware of myself and I have to express myself. A garment is also an expression of self. Right? The clothing we wear is obviously very important in terms of the message we give the world. And if people want to pretend that clothing doesn't give off a message, so they wear certain clothing, so that's the message they're giving off. That my message to the world is I don't think clothing gives off a message. Well, okay, fine, I get it. That's the message you're giving with your clothes. My clothes give a message is a question. The ikar achet, who a hergish and ma'urav b'tevara, is the sensitivity of the mixture of good and evil. In other words, what were they now aware? Eitzadas tevara. They were now aware of the fact that there's a reality that is, on some revealed way, not connected to Elokus. Now, of course, it is connected to Elokus because everything comes from the Eibishter B'Seder. But what's a Ra? Ra is the reality that's not in line with the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Oh, so they're now aware of the existence of such a thing, which is all new, because until that point, what were they aware of? Elokus. And what were they intuitively able to do, without being told? Express the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because they couldn't relate to any other level. And again, that's why it's hard to understand how they actually did something which the Eibishter told them not to do, but okay, fine. It's a question everybody asks, and there's all sorts of answers, and none of them are complete because we can't understand it. Right? Okay. That being said, they did it. Now, obviously, the Eibishter wanted them to do it because it's part of the sixth day of creation. It's not history, it's creation. The world the Eibishter wanted is the world that came as a result of this Aveira. That's what garments are. The sensitivity to my own self. Meaning that there's a reality, so to speak, outside of the Eibishter. Not that I'm not connected to the Eibishter. Adam Rishon was a big tzaddik. Okay, Beseder, but he was aware of Adam Rishon. He was aware of Chava. He was aware of the reality around him in a very, very powerful way. And somehow that reality was separate from the Eibishter and had to come close to the Eibishter. Not that he didn't fry out Adam Rishon. He was a big tzaddik for the next 930 years. Supposed to live 1,000 years, right? What happened to those 70 years? Who took them?
Give it to David.
Gave it to David HaMelech. David HaMelech had those 70 years. V'sharshay, in its source, what is all of this? Hergish Seichel v'midas. Where is the most powerful experience of self? Seichel and midas. My intellectual understanding, my emotional state. V'lochen, let's just finish the union of Nevuah and then we'll stop and we'll finish the Mayanot tomorrow morning. Lochen, be'es and Nevuah, yetzarech lias havshotas levushim. Therefore, we had to throw off these garments, this experience of self, in order to be a kli for the Eibishter's seichel. Shuinin havshotas hergish the seichel, throwing off my sensitivity and feeling and awareness of my own seichel and my own midos. V'hainu liyos bebechinas bittul keiches v'chushim. And that's why they would shake on the ground. Right? They had no filter. They lost sense of self. They had no self-control, so to speak. Not because they were below it, they were above it. The nullification of their powers and their senses. You give me 2 more lines and we'll stop. Ukamavur b'Rambam, like the Rambam says, the Rambam Chassidus Torah, the 7th through 10th chapter discuss Nevuah. I mean, other things also in there, but Nevuah starts in chapter 7. Miyasede Hadas, it's one of the foundations of the religion, Leda, to know. Now it's very interesting, the language of the Rambam. Not that a person can reach Nevuah. It's not what the Rambam says. Rather, Shakel Yisbarach Menaba B'nei Adam, that the Eibishter gives Nevuah to people. I mean, where's Nevuah come from? It comes from the Eibishter. You have to make yourself a kli for that. But the Nevuah is coming from a place beyond us. It's not coming from within us. This is coming from within us, so then that level of reality exists mitzad us. No, this level of reality exists only mitzad the Eibishter. But can a person become a kli for that? Yes, which is really quite astounding. So who is the kli for that? The Nevuah, and this is the continuation of the Rambam. The Nevuah chalat falls al chochem v'gibor, someone who's very wise and very strong. What does that mean? He's very strong. It means gaber al yitzra, who overcomes his, yitzra, his own personal desires. Vein yitzra means gaber ela b'shum davar, and his own personal desires don't overcome him in any way. He's a kli for elikus. Boruch, as is explained there at great length, and therefore this is called shtus. Okay. We'll go further tomorrow. We'll finish tomorrow. Bezrat Hashem.
Rabbi, thank you.
Yeah.
Feel better as well.
Bezrat Hashem. Oh, what a great job.
Rabbi.
Great job.
Thank you.
3 words. Intellect. So.
Yeah, welcome back.
To really understand how it works.
Nice.
It's beyond, it's beyond intellect.
Oh, I thought you were tired.
No, he's alive.